Hello YouTube, welcome to part 8 of the Book of Five Rings review. Once again, we're going to listen to the words of Musashi and try to understand them so that we can get some benefits in our lives and in our training. We're starting the Book of the Wind today. And Musashi opens the Book of the Wind by saying that in strategy, you must know the ways of other schools. So he has written about various other traditions of strategies in this Wind book. Without knowledge of the ways of other schools, it is difficult to understand the essence of your own school. Whether or not you have your own training style, in my opinion, it is also good to know the training styles of other people. For example, for me, even though I'm purely in it for the aesthetic component and I only care about the way my body looks, I also find that I can learn a lot from sports that might deviate from that. For example, I watch a ton of strongman, I still follow powerlifting closely, I follow arm wrestling, sumo wrestling. All of these sports have very little to do with bodybuilding, but there are always components that I can relate to my practice. And it's also the case of having something to compare what you do with, so that you're not just stuck in your own head. You're not stuck in an echo chamber where the only thing that exists is your own way. This is the surest way to becoming dogmatic, and you want to avoid that. He continues, looking at other schools, we find that some that specialize in techniques, some schools study the way of the short sword, some study the way of the long sword, some schools teach dexterity, some teach swords technique, teaching attitudes of the sword as the surface and the way as the interior. That none of these are the true way I show clearly in this book. All the vices and virtues and rights and wrongs show that my school is different. Other schools make accomplishments their means of livelihood, growing flowers and decoratively coloring articles in order to sell them. This is definitely not the way of strategy. This is a little bit complicated. It doesn't have to be. What really matters here is the comparison between the schools and what Musashi says the other schools are doing. What does he say? He says that the other schools are growing flowers and coloring articles to sell them. That should ring a bell. In YouTube fitness, if you want to make money out of it, you're going to have to market, and the truth of the matter is most of the products that are being marketed are worthless because the only thing you can sell people is stuff that is worthless. Selling hard work and consistency doesn't make any money because those are not things that people want to follow. The only people that want to follow that won't buy it from you because they already have it. They don't need someone to make a program for them or explain to them how they should live their life. The only people who are susceptible to those marketing tacticals are, for the most part, beginners or people who don't want to work hard, and therefore if you sell them an easy way out, they will get it because they think that paying for coaching or for a program or for a diet is going to make the hard work less hard, in a sense, meaning that they think they can pay their way towards getting a good body, but that's not possible. That's what Musashi denounces here. Some of the world's strategists are concerned only with sword fencing and limit their training to flourishing the long sword and carriage of the body. But is dexterity alone sufficient to win? This is not the essence of the way. Many things could be said to be complementing the way the body moves. The most important one is of course the spirit, right? In some sense, if you have the ability to move the body, most likely you developed the spirit. But if you have a teacher that has the spirit but only teaches you how to move the body and doesn't insist on you strengthening your mind, then you might be at the end an unfinished product. You might have the technical skills, but the spiritual strength that should come with it, that you should have built through training, is nowhere to be found, and that's very detrimental. I have recorded the unsatisfactory point of other schools one by one in this book. You must study these matters deeply to appreciate the benefit of my Nito Ichi score. Interestingly enough, Musashi hasn't really done it. If you read the book, he never openly criticizes other schools. He never names the other schools, he never names the name of the masters, and he never explains their methods and what they're wrong. He just gives you his method, and he gives you a short example of a counter method that would be less beneficial. I really like this approach. I think that when you criticize someone, you should criticize ideas. Don't criticize names, don't criticize brands, just critique the idea. People who are smart will relate the idea to the person who's peddling them, but trying to get into those feuds ultimately just breeds drama, and it's not good for intellectual discussions. I expect there is a case for the school in question liking extra long swords as part of its doctrine, but if we compare this to real life, it is unreasonable. Surely, we need not necessarily be defeated if we are using a short sword and have no long sword. A super important part of Musashi's discourse here, where he tells you, hey, I'm not saying using a long sword is wrong. I am saying that only using a long sword is wrong, and the mindset of thinking that wielding only a long sword is best is wrong. This is a perfect anti-dogmatic stance that Musashi is taking. He's not telling you, hey, follow my way. He's telling you, hey, my way is the best because I'm open. Whatever allows you to win, do it. Don't let yourself be stuck in a certain way just because someone told you to. Most of the time, when a doctrine, when teachings, when a certain discipline is stuck in its way and it only wants to do it that one way, it has nothing to do with it being the best way. It has everything to do with it being either tradition or a marketing scheme where the person who created that school of thought understands that it needs to keep you repeating the same things because this is the identity of the product they're trying to sell. You can recognize that in lifting as well. Certain lifting gurus who tell you to only do certain lifts and other lifts are worthless, or they'll tell you that you need to do that rep range and that any other rep range is worthless. All of that is dogmatism, and it is going to be unproductive. In this world, it is said 1 inch gives the end advantage, but these are the idle words of one who does not know strategy. It shows the inferior strategy of a weak spirit that men should be dependent on the length of their sword, fighting from a distance with the benefit of strategy. Again, I'm not a swordsman. I don't. Those metaphors, if you only look at them at face value, will be of little use. But if you think about it deeply, what he really means is thinking that you're going to be superior in battle just because you have more reach is stupid, because there are 1,000 other variables you're not taking into consideration. What if the person you're fighting is faster than you and they enter within your reach and you can't slash them anymore? What if they have longer arms? They now have more reach than you with the same length of swords. All of these things should be considered. The metaphor here is the long sword is a dogmatic idea. And he says it so when he continues, and when I already discussed that, where he says that we need not lose if we are using a short sword. Meaning that what matters is not the way, it's not the movement you do, it's not the equipment you use, it's what you do with it. You can fight someone with a long sword, with a short sword. If you just throw it at them and land it in their heart, you win. Even though you didn't have the reach advantage. That's what he means by that. Do not be limited by the preconceived properties of an item or of things in life in general, because it only makes you less flexible. From olden times, it has been said, great and small go together. So do not unconditionally dislike extra long swords. What I dislike is the inclination towards the long swords. If we consider large-scale strategy, we can think of large forces in terms of long swords and small forces as short swords. Cannot few me give battle against many? there are many instances of few men overcoming many. He basically concludes and explains everything he said before. He doesn't like the short sword more than he likes the long sword, or vice versa. He's just saying they both have their place. And if you watch the previous installments, you also understand what he means by short, by big and small. It's the rat's head and the ox's neck. It's the ability to shift your focus from the big picture to the small picture. An army of 10,000 men is made up of units of 10 men, which are commanded by units of 100 men, etc., etc. The big picture is usually made up of small things. And if you're unable to understand that you're going to be unable to understand life in general. Because while the big picture is of course the most important, the fragments that make the big picture are just as much, because they are of equal importance. In my doctrine, I dislike preconceived narrow spirit. You must study this well. It's such an easy concept, right? But so few people actually manage to do that. And the reason why is because as humans, we need to have values, we need to have morals, we need to have things that we hold on, because they make up our identity. And a lot of people think that if they change their mind, they're giving up who they are. And I agree to an extent, right? No one likes a flip-flopper. There are certain things in life that you should have a hard stance on because they define who you are. That being said, just because you believe strongly in one thing doesn't mean that your belief in it will not be nuanced with time. That is not coming back on your word, it's just adapting. And it's the same for everything you do. Approach things with an open spirit. It's going to give you much more options and an ability to embrace things coming your way that is much better, because you're now fully balanced, right? This is the difference between someone who's standing tall with their feet together and someone who might be having a wider base with their feet apart. The first one will be knocked over by the first thing that comes his way. Sure, he looks proud and tall and grandstanding, but at the end of the day, what is the point of that? It's just ego, it's vanity, because this is not a good way to sustain your life. If you have balance, then you can actually modify your stance, you can see things coming, and you can always be one step ahead. And Musashi understands that perfectly, because he continues. If you are concerned with the strength of your sword, you will try to cut unreasonably strongly, and will not be able to cut at all. It is also bad to try to cut strongly when testing the sword. Whenever you cross swords with an enemy, you must not think of cutting him either strongly or weakly. Just think of cutting. Be intent solely upon killing the enemy. Do not try to cut strongly, and do not think of cutting weakly. You should only be concerned with killing. I relate that to lifting. A lot of people will tell you, oh, you have to lift as fast as possible. Some people will tell you, no, lift slow. Usually the first school of thought is for powerlifters, and the second school of thought is for bodybuilding. I say lift with, in your mind, the intent of actually finishing the lift. That's it. Which means that if in the moment going fast is the best option, go fast, and if it's going slow, go slow. It all depends on what you want to do. But focusing on speed might reduce your technique, it might lead to injury, and focusing on being too slow might actually rob you of some of your strength, because you're going to lower the tempo so much that you now killed any momentum you might have. And you're not even getting extra muscle under tension time with this, because the truth is, the stretch reflex of the muscle at the bottom of the lift, for lifts that have a negative and a positive portion, is going to put much more stress on the muscle than the lengthening portion of the time you spent by slowing down the descent. If you rely on strength, when you hit the enemy's sword, you will hit too hard. If you do this, your own sword will be carried along as a result. Thus the saying, the strongest hand wins, has no meaning. It's interesting how this also relates to lifting. If you squat, for example, and you focus on bringing the weight up as fast as possible, you might very well shoot up so fast that the bar is going to come out of position. And then what? You just compromise your position, and the rest of the set is going to be much worse for it. It's the same for what Musashi says. Do not try and go as fast as possible. Push with might, but control the energy that you're putting into the bar. Without the correct principle, the fight cannot be won. Here, the fight could be many things. The fight could even be life. We go through life following certain principles. People who follow erroneous or faulty principles fail at life. People who follow highly moral and what we would call good principles succeed. The spirit of my school is to win through the wisdom of strategy, paying no attention to trifles. Study this well. Strategy is a broad term in reality. You should have understood that by now, because we spoke about it in so many terms under so many different angles that at this point, what is even strategy? Strategy, in my opinion, is intelligence. It's the ability to understand a situation and to get the best out of it so that you are the winner at the end. And that can take many forms. And we're going to finish with, we have two to finish this. So we're going to finish with those two. He says, the way of strategy is straight and true. You must chase the enemy around and make him obey your spirit. Always think about that. You are on the way, you are on the path. It is straight and true. If it stops being so, then you are amiss. You left the path. The enemy is your weakness, it's your insecurities, it's all those things that you're going to encounter as you walk on the path, and you should chase them out of the path. You do not want them to walk with you on the path. You don't want them to be always ahead of you. You also don't want them to be in your back, because it would mean that you never dealt with them. You need to chase it around and make it obey your spirit. Any fear you have, any insecurity you have, anything that you think you cannot conquer, it's all in your head. You can conquer it. Without you, it does not exist. Think about it in this way. If you fear something and you ended up dying, that fear would disappear with you. Why? It's a parasite. It only exists because you exist and you decided to give it birth. You are the parent of that feeling. So you can also, if you decide to, make it obey your will. You just have to be willing to do that, strong enough. And we'll finish off with Musashi saying, footballers do not fix their eyes on the ball, but by good play on the field, they can perform well. When you become accustomed to something, you are not limited to the use of your eyes. People such as master musicians have the music score in front of their nose, but this does not mean that they fix their eyes on those things specifically, or that they make pointless movements. It means that they can see naturally. This relates to Musashi's method of widening your field of vision. You can refer to, I think, part 5 if you want to hear more about that. But basically, you can see things without watching them intently. It's what he calls seeing naturally. If you watch high-level point guards in the NBA, for example, you'll see that they don't really look, like they don't fully turn their heads to look at the field. They see naturally. They know where everyone is, and if they look at someone, most likely it's a feint. It's to get the defense to focus on cutting the pass so they have an open course somewhere else. Everyone can achieve this on whatever you want to do, right? It's not as important in lifting, because in lifting nothing is in motion. There are no players in motion around you, but if you play sports, or if you do martial arts, or if you just want to have better situational awareness, you have to practice this. Don't look at things instantly. Look at the broader picture and focus on your ability to see everything. Everything that is in your field of vision is under your control. You have to memorize that well, and you have to believe that within yourself. And that's going to be that for this review. We have still 2 pages to go on this Book of the Wind, but next week is going to be the last installment. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed these reviews. And we will soon be moving on to the Agakure, so we're going to remain in the Eastern school of thought, the Japanese school of thought, because there is so much to learn from these masters. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.